This case begins in Amersfoort, the Netherlands, in 2014. It involves two young Dutch women, 22-year-old Lisanne Froon, and her best friend, 21-year-old Kris Kremers. The girls worked together at the Den Klein and Hop restaurant in Amsterdam, where they had been working endlessly and saving for 6 months to go on the journey of a lifetime to Panama. Here, they had intended to stay for 6 weeks with a host family, volunteering to work with local children and learning some Spanish. Unfortunately, the much-anticipated trip would take a turn, with sinister events leading to many unanswered questions. Possibly the biggest. What went so wrong that these two girls would never be seen alive again? Lisanne Froon was described as optimistic, intelligent, a passionate volleyball player, and the more reserved of the two. She had graduated with a degree in applied sciences from Saxe-Sion University the previous September. Kris Kremers, on the other hand, was described as sparkling and extroverted. She was open and creative, with striking red hair, and had just completed her studies in cultural social education, specializing in art education at the University of Utrecht. The trip was intended to be a reward for Kris for graduating. She had developed a love for South America after a holiday in Peru with her parents, and had encouraged Lisanne that this is where they should travel. Lisanne had never traveled further than southern Germany with her parents. On March 15, 2014, the much-anticipated day had arrived. The girls headed to the Schiphol airport with their families, where they would say their goodbyes, unknowingly for the last time. As you can see from the photos, the girls were excited to begin their holiday, with weeks of freedom and exploring ahead. The girls boarded a plane from Amsterdam to Costa Rica. From there they traveled to Bocas del Toro. The girls first visited the coast of Panama and had a good time, learning some Spanish, enjoying the beach, food, drinks, sightseeing and dancing in the evening. It was here that they met two Dutch young men, who they spent a lot of time with during the first few days. Kris and Lisanne arrived in Baquet 2 weeks later on March 29, a city close to the western border in which they would be staying with their host family. They traveled to the school where they would be volunteering, but once here, the staff told them that they could not work there that week as planned. They had no place for them now, and the girls had to come back a week later. Hans Kremers, Kris's father, also stated later on that the Spanish-language school in Baquet, who had organized the volunteer work, had even sent an email 3 days before they were supposed to start their volunteer work, confirming their start on the following Monday. Lisanne stated in her diary of their disappointment at being sent away, and had wrote of how rude the staff had been to them. The girls were due to stay with a local host family in Alto Baquet for 4 weeks. Miriam Guerra often houses international students, and had a room for the girls with its own entrance separate from the main house. Miriam described the girls as intelligent but shy. She stated that in the first evening there, Kris read a book in the girls' bedroom, while Lisanne kept Miriam company in the living room. Despite not speaking very good Spanish, Lisanne managed to explain to Miriam that they didn't yet know what to do with their newfound free time. Miriam recalled that Lisanne had coughed a lot, as she was asthmatic. Lisanne had also not been feeling too well and had a sore throat. Miriam brought them breakfast at their room on Sunday, March 30th, their second day in Baquet. She learned that the girls planned to walk around Baquet to learn more about the way of life there. Photos show them out and about in Baquet that Sunday. They came back home before sunset. On April 2nd, the girls had booked a hike with a local tour guide to guide them through the famous Pianista Trail, a popular hiking trail amongst tourists to Panama. However, as the girls had no plans for April 1st, they decided to go ahead with the trail a day early, without the tour guide. The Pianista Trail brings walkers to a summit at around an 8-kilometer distance from Baquet, passing clouded jungle forests and waterfalls along the way. A taxi picked them up and brought them to the start of the trail. The driver declared that he dropped them off in the afternoon at around 1:30 p.m., but the clock on their digital camera suggests they started around 11 o'clock in the morning on their hike. This is only one of many inconsistencies in this sinister story. Lisanne and Kris wore light clothing on the day, shorts and a tank top, and didn't bring much with them. They had brought one small bottle of water between them, indicating that they only planned to be out for a short while. Residents at the start of the trail have later declared that they warned the girls not to walk up there by themselves, but the girls waved their worries away. There was word that they also took a local dog along with them for company. The dog had belonged to restaurant owners who they had met at the start of the trail, but suspicion rose when the dog later returned to Baquet that same day, without the two girls. The host family is said to have searched the area surrounding their home once they realized that their guests had not come back in the evening, but found no sign of the girls. Giving them the benefit of the doubt, the host family decided they would wait until the morning to continue their search. As stated earlier, Kris and Lisanne had scheduled a private walking tour with a local guide the next day, but they never showed up for this meeting. Because of this, he went to look for the girls at the home of the host family. Realizing that the girls were now missing, he and a staff member from the language school contacted the authorities and the girls' families. The next morning, on Thursday, April 3rd, authorities are said to have conducted an aerial search of the forest, as well as a foot search, with the help of local residents. The families of both Kris and Lisanne hadn't heard from their daughters since April 1st. Before that date, the girls had been in daily contact with their families. Hans characterizes his daughter and her friend as responsible, down-to-earth girls, who do not easily run into trouble. If they deviate from their plans, they always let their parents know and are serious and punctual. Tensions were high, as a humid climate with hills and mountains on the Pianista route brought the girls to a height of 1,250 meters, with heavy dense brush spread over 9.6 kilometers. And by all accounts, Lisanne was not 100% well at that time. When their parents still hadn't heard anything by April 6th, they boarded a plane along with detectives from the Netherlands. Together, police, dog units and the Dutch detectives searched the forests for a solid 10 days. Kris and Lisanne's parents offered a reward of $30,000 for information leading to their safe return, but even this didn't bring them any new information. Nothing was heard or seen from the girls for weeks, even months. Then, after about 10 weeks, a local native woman brought Lisanne's blue backpack to the police. She claimed it had been found in a rice paddy on the bank of the river Culebra, in a remote area, nearly 8 kilometers, and at least 14 walking hours from the location where the girls were last seen. She said she was certain that the backpack had not been there the day before. People from the Justice Department picked the backpack up with a helicopter. Police assumed it was drifted by the river to this spot, but the backpack was dry, and everything inside was in good working order. It was a simple, non-waterproof backpack made from cheap fabric that under normal circumstances would have gotten soaked while being in the fast-flowing river, so this was a mystery to all involved in the case. It had been raining heavily in the prior few weeks, and the backpack did not look like it had spent weeks in a super wet muddy jungle. It was in an immaculate condition, and showed no signs of wear, considering it had been in a highly humid rainforest for 72 days. This backpack also contained the first clues about what might have happened to the girls. Inside were 2 neatly folded up bras, 2 simple pairs of sunglasses, an empty water bottle, both girls' mobile phones, a Samsung Galaxy from Lisanne and an iPhone from Kris, a digital camera, Lisanne's passport, Kris's medical insurance card, and 83 American dollars. It is stated that as many as 34 different fingerprints were found, 13 on the backpack, 12 on the phones and the camera, as well as 6 different ones on the bras. However, no leads were followed up in reference to the native individuals. The data on the mobile phones now allowed investigators to gather a sense of what unraveled on the day the girls were last seen. The phone records showed that within hours after the start of their hike, the girls were in trouble. Around 4:30 p.m., when it was still light, a first attempt was made to call emergency services. Around 10 minutes later, a second attempt was made. They used both the Dutch emergency number 112, and they later dialed 911, which isn't only the American emergency number, but also Panama's emergency number for ambulances. Unfortunately, due to poor reception, their calls did not connect. Then they switched their phones off, and tried calling again 14 hours later. In the days that followed, more attempts to dial emergency services were made. On day 2 of their disappearance, Wednesday, April 2nd, Calls were made at 6:58 a.m. through to 1:56 p.m. Both phones were used alternatively. This is also the only day when one of their calls made a short connection. During the first call attempt that morning, Lisanne's Samsung phone managed to make connection for 1 to 2 seconds. Then the connection was broken off again, and the phone was switched off after approximately 36 seconds. Between the last call of day 2 and the first call of day 3, sits 19.5 hours. Then followed a string of attempts to just find a reception signal, mostly following a specific pattern of daily times. The phones never again make a connection though, and over time the phones were used less and less to try to call emergency services. On day 5, the battery of the Samsung phone belonging to Lisanne died, and the phone was no longer used after that. The iPhone from Kris was however switched on and off until April 11th, which is a very long time for a smartphone, battery-wise. Especially considering Dutch forensic investigators have confirmed that both the phones had only 50% battery life on day 1. Then suddenly on day 11, Kris's iPhone was switched on again at 10:51 a.m., and stayed on for 1 hour. That is the last time it was used. Also important to mention, on day 6, when Lisanne's Samsung Galaxy battery had died, there were suddenly multiple attempts to activate Kris's iPhone. Strangely, the wrong PIN code was entered several times, indicating that Kris was no longer able to operate her phone, or did not have possession of it. Overall, there were 77 wrong attempts to access the iPhone. Then, there was the digital camera in Lisanne's backpack. The camera was also found in good condition with remaining battery life. Researchers were able to view around 133 consecutive photos. The first photos showed the girls in good spirits on April 1st, confirming that the women had in fact arrived to the Pianista Trail. The girls took photos of each other and the weather was good, sunny and clear. These first photos show them walking up the trail. Then the next set of photos on the girls' camera established precisely that they were at El Mirador, a lookout on the El Pianista Trail, at the summit of the Continental Divide. Experts have said that they could determine from the sun's angle that the photos were taken at approximately 1 p.m. But there is some controversy about these times, due to multiple witness statements placing the girls around 2 p.m. at the start of the Pianista Trail. Normally tourists turn around at this lookout point at the top of the Pianista Trail, to walk the same path back to Baquet. These days there are signs placed at the top, warning people not to keep walking further without a guide, because there is more treacherous terrain ahead. We don't know why they didn't just return to Baquet the same way they came. We can only see the photos they kept taking, showing they wandered on, to what is called the Caribbean descent. Not that walking onwards was some sort of abnormality, or risky business. The trail is used by locals and tourists alike, to see more local beauty spots which featured natural tunnels, streams, waterfalls and cable bridges. But it was not the way back to Baquet, but instead a route leading further away from it. Image 491 of the camera shows Kris with a stern look on her face, holding a water bottle in front of her. This one is taken a little bit before the summit. Image 493 is said to show the trail up the Il Pianista, around 700 meters before the highest point. It was taken at 12:42 p.m. Then follows a string of selfies on the Pianista summit. Image 499 shows Lisanne smiling on the top of the mountain, the Mirador, at 1 p.m. Some people commented on the strange way in which her body seems stretched in this photo, and out of proportion, making some people believe that there is photoshopping present. 6 minutes later, image 500 is taken. It is not known how the clouds can look so different between both photos, even though all images at the summit were taken within a 6-minute time frame. By the time they were done taking summit selfies, the girls did not return back to Baquet. Instead, they continued to walk on, past the summit. Image 505 shows Kris with her arms folded behind her back, looking around. This one was taken after they walked straight on, further into the jungle. The time is now 1:20 p.m. Around this time, the connection of their mobile phones was cut off as they had ventured too far from the summit. Then image 507 shows Kris crossing a small stream, seen from the back again, at 1:54 p.m. 8 seconds later, image 508 was taken. It is the last photo taken by the girls during daylight. Strangely enough, there are two versions of photo number 508. One shows in its metadata that it was taken 8 seconds after photo 507, but another version of the same photo states that this last photo of Kris looking backwards was taken 50 seconds before the previous photo of her passing the creek. Of course, with her general direction of movement being forward and not backwards, this makes no sense. A photo specialist explained that he thinks this can be linked to photo manipulation by a third party. The fact that no more daytime photos were made on April 1st after the stream image, number 508, could implicate either that they kept walking and got lost, or ran into some sort of trouble, which prevented them from taking any more photos. With the sun setting around 6:40 p.m. that day, this means that Kris and Lisanne should have turned around to walk back to Buckhead at 4 p.m. at the latest. Although that would have been already risky, and 3 p.m. would be a better time. It could explain possibly why the girls kept walking after having reached the summit, believing they had plenty of time with it being just 2 p.m., but panicking at 4:39 p.m. The Pianista Trail is a clear path, but once you walk on, paths eventually become small trails, poorly maintained, and the jungle closes in. Initially, the ongoing path is clear to follow and surrounded by stone walls that make it impossible to divert from the trail. Many believe that the reason why Kris and Lisanne started calling emergency services shortly after 4:30 p.m. whilst it was still daylight, may be because they were followed by someone who forced them deeper into the jungle. If they had been lost at that point, the obvious and most logical thing to do for them would have been to simply turn around. There was one path to follow. So why didn't they? Many have commented on the last photo of the girls. Kris appears bothered by something behind the camera. These are the last photos for a long time, because for a whole week afterwards, no more photos were seemingly made with the digital camera. That was until April 8th, when over 90 strange nighttime photos were shot between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m., showing mostly all darkness and vague natural surroundings. But now it gets more eerie. There's one missing photo, originally sitting just between the daytime photos and the mysterious and ominous nighttime photos made a week later. The camera automatically numbers the photos taken, and image 509 is missing. Dutch specialist teams have tried everything to get that one deleted photo back, which normally is not a big problem when an image is manually deleted. Hackers and IT specialists have special software that can retrieve such photos, because pressing delete does not usually mean the whole file is actually erased. Yet despite a team working on it, they could not find the missing photo on the camera. Some people suggest that the girls ran into the wrong crowd, and may have made a photo of someone who did not want to be identified. It is of course also possible that the Panamanian authorities took photo 509 off the camera themselves when they first investigated it, because something incriminating was on it. Something they wanted to hide from the world. Others suggest that Kris and Lisanne themselves may just have removed an unsuccessful selfie. Aside from the fact that manual deleting would not have erased the file permanently, when in a state of panic or at least restlessness, would they really bother to delete a photo simply because they didn't like the way they looked in it? The nighttime photos are still unexplained. And this is when things get really eerie. I have been haunted for some time by these photos, and their possible implications. They were found on the digital camera of Kris and Lisanne. They were taken on April 8th, so at least a week after the girls got lost. On average, one picture was taken every 2 minutes, for the duration of 180 minutes. The first photo of this series that we know of shows a nightly landscape with rocks and bushes. This photo is number 542. It was taken at 1:38 a.m. The person who took this photo seems to look down from the top of a rock into bushes and darkness. A second photo shows red plastic attached to small sticks placed on a rock, and with what looks to be 2 chewing gum wrappers next to them. This photo is number 550, and was taken at 1:39 a.m. Some people suggested they may have waved these red DIY flags to sign a helicopter flying over, perhaps intended to be some sign of life from Kris and Lisanne, and a marker of where they were. The third and most alarming sight was a picture of the back of Kris's head. Kris's hair also looks dry. Many night photos show raindrops falling down from the dark sky, but Kris must have been sheltered somewhere, because her hair isn't wet. This third photo is number 580 and was taken at 1:49 a.m. The final image we will study is a photo that surfaced years later, in 2015. It is a photo where the flash lights up pieces of scattered around toilet paper, a mirror, and a strap. They are all placed on a rock. It was Jeremy Crite, the Daily Beast journalist, who first printed this photo in his online article on this case. He wrote that the toilet paper was used to form some sort of SOS sign. No fully satisfactory explanation has ever been given for these pictures, although there are many suggestions made. For instance, that Lisanne was trying to capture proof of Kris's body and its location in the middle of the night. The leaked night shots make it clear that whomever took these photos did not walk around, but kept making photos of the same static place in nature. It is also possible that someone flashed the camera to attract attention from search operations. But helicopters did not fly in the depth of night. Also possible perhaps, is that the girls heard strange sounds in the vicinity and used the flashlight to scare off animals in the dark. Did the girls even take those photos themselves? We have no proof that they did. No selfies were made. We see nothing that identifies the person who made the photos, no distinguishable hands or hair hanging in front of the lens for instance. What we do have however, is Kris's strawberry red hair being pictured, so at least she must have been there that night. Right? That is, unless the photo times and dates were meddled with. Journalist Jeremy Crite also stated that the nighttime photos were across the bridgehead over the Rio Culebra, featuring a monkey bridge that stretches across the river about 25 feet above the rapids. He said, "Unless they were actively chased by something or someone, I find it hard to believe that the girls would voluntarily and without a pressing reason decide to cross a river and wonky cable bridges in the dead of night." Tourists who walked the same trail described them as follows: "We crossed 3 rivers on these cable death bridges. I inched across, terrified each time. On the first death bridge I was so scared my shaking legs made the cables wobble. My friend made fun of me for hours, and didn't mention until later that a local had recently died on a crossing." Some of the images are sharp and clear in a way that they have been marked as deliberately intended to show a specific image. Upon examining the photos, a wildlife expert since stated, "She might be trying to use the camera to tell us something she thinks is important. Something that went down that night, and she wanted to record it for her loved ones or whoever else." On June 19, 2014, with the help of 6 natives, a local guide found bone remains, shorts, and 2 different shoes along the river Rio Culebra. The shorts were said to have been found on top of a rock, neatly folded on the bank, at least 8 walking hours away from Baquet, and several kilometers away from where Lisanne's backpack had been discovered. Although later the very people who found the shorts would claim that they in fact found them not neatly folded at all, but floating in the river itself. Bone remnants were also found several walking hours away, further north. On June 19, Officer of Justice Betzeda Pitti confirmed that human remains had been found in the search for Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon. One of the shoes found contained human bones, a foot, still protected by its boot. The laces were still laced tightly and it also had a sock still inside it, containing the foot which still had some skin and meat on it. The brown shoe found in the jungle turned out to be from a Dutch brand called Wild Beast. It is only sold in Paris sport shops in the Netherlands, and soon proved to be Lisanne's. At least 33 widely scattered bones were also discovered along the same river bank, of which most fragments came from one left leg, also belonging to Lisanne. On June 20, 2014, the girls' families made a public statement, telling the public that they had strong reasons to believe that the girls had passed away. Up until then, they had always sounded hopeful that their daughters would eventually be found alive. Then, on August 29, 2014, more remains were found in the jungle. More small bony remains of the girls, and a rolled-up ball-shaped piece of tissue, skin, that turned out to belong to Lisanne. Strangely enough, the forensic pathologist later found that the skin was still in an early state of decomposition. It appeared in stark contrast with Kris's fully bleached and clean bones. The pathologist also found out that the bone marrow in the femur and tibia bone from Lisanne proved to be dry and was not decomposed. The forensic pathologist believed that the piece of skin was manipulated. The foot from Lisanne showed to have been broken in many places, consistent with a fall from a great height. The periosteum of Lisanne's foot showed signs of inflammation, something scientists linked to strenuous use or overexertion of the foot. This type of injury can, for instance, be caused by very strenuous long-distance walking, and is also seen with marathon walkers who haven't trained long enough. Unlike Lisanne's foot bones, Kris's bones also contain a high concentration of phosphates, which are linked to chemical bleaching procedures. Soil samples taken by Dutch investigators from the spot where the bones from Kris were found showed that this phosphorus was not present in the soil naturally. Both sets of bones seem unnatural in their state of decomposition. The contrast between Lisanne's bones still having intact skin on them, but Kris's bones being squeaky clean and without any body tissue remnants, is highly suspicious. For a piece of skin to be found intact months after passing, while out in the animal-infested and humid open-air jungle, is peculiar. It seemed clear by now that the girls were dead, but how did their bones get dislodged and spread out over the area? Forensic teams stated that no claw marks, no bite marks from the fangs of animals, no marks that would indicate they had been broken up on river rocks either, were found on the bones. Something you would certainly expect to see if the bodies had bounced over rocks and swept through wild rivers. The same goes for the backpack and its delicate contents. The director of the Colorado Wilderness Medicine School, Carl Weil, stated, "After 2 months the bone should not be bare, but still covered with significant amounts of flesh. Unless, of course, there was human intervention." The parents of both girls later took the same trail in an attempt to find answers and lead their own investigation into the sinister case. The parents say that they did not see or pass any dangerous spot where you can slip, or fall, or injure yourself in any serious way. No ravines, no steep descents. The parents of Kris therefore think that between the river spot where the last picture was taken and the meadow, something strange must have happened. They hinted at foul play. Kris's parents are convinced the girls did not voluntarily walk on for days. They refuse to believe that Kris and Lisanne got lost, after seeing for themselves that after you reach the top of the Pianista Trail, the path continues on for kilometers in a clearly visible and safe manner. And by 4 p.m. the girls would have surely turned around and walked the same trail back normally, knowing how long the walk up until then had taken them. Kris's parents do not believe that the girls would have ventured off the path. "They wouldn't be so stupid, you'd really have to make an effort to get lost here," they said. We may not ever find out what happened to Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon, but what we do know is that something went very wrong on that hiking trail. And whether the girls were injured, lost, or preyed upon in their vulnerability, a time that should have been one of the most happy and unforgettable in their lives, will now remain a painful memory in the hearts of those that love them. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more videos, please like and subscribe to support the channel.